Welcome back. Look, our quilt is growing. We've got our section 1, our section 2, and both of our section 3s together. Now it's time to visit the aquarium. So this is what we're going to be working on that will go at the bottom of the quilt. I know it looks really challenging, but I promise we're going to break it down into manageable sections just like we've done with this whole quilt. Okay, so just as we assigned the butterfly fabrics, we're going to do pretty much the same thing here. Go ahead and print out a couple of the unmarked patterns that are provided in your pattern. Print those out and then color them in a way that mimics some of the fabric that you've chosen initially. Now, that's a great way to scale that down. And I just colored the ocean pieces here just to make sure that I had enough of the blues to separate them out. The fish, you can color as well. I've chosen those fabrics, and all of the fabrics for the ocean and the fish I added to my storyboard, and that pretty much completes the color story of our quilt. Okay, so once you've got your fabrics selected for your fish and your ocean, you can now print out the part of the pattern that's got the labels on it. This pattern can be enlarged in a couple of different ways. The pattern that we're going to be working with, the templates are enlarged at a 2.75 times the size of this drawing. So this drawing is a 4 by 8 inch drawing, and as you can see, I have printed it out and I have added 1 inch grid lines to the drawing. If you're gonna take it over to the copy store, you don't need to add the grid lines and you don't need to do what we're about to do. This is a manual, paper and pencil, old school way of enlarging a pattern. But again, if you're going to take it over, just make sure you print 2.75 times the size of this. That will end up to be 11 by 22 inches. And then you'll also need the reverse of this as well. So go over and you can get that enlarged and print that out. And of course, you can print a couple copies just so you have one. But if you wanted to try your hand at enlarging this just with the grid system, here's what you do. Again, grid out just 1 inch increments. Okay, so you've got 4 by 8 going across. You're going to rip a piece of freezer paper out. I've just got a little small sample, but you would take a freezer paper, and most of freezer paper is 18 inches wide. You're going to take a 22, at least a 22 inch length of freezer paper, and just add a couple more inches just so you have some room to play with. Then you're going to grid that out. You're going to draw a box that's 11 inches tall by 22 inches wide, and you're going to, with pencil, make a grid mark at every 2.75 inches across and down. So again, when you do your grid lines on your freezer paper, make sure that's done in pencil. I've got them in Sharpie here just so you can see them on the camera, but these will be done in pencil because these are not going to ultimately matter to our template. This only matters for the drawing. This, I start at the bottom left, and this is the only square that I'm focused on right now. I'm going to transfer what is in this square to this square, trying to stay as close to the scale as I can. These are organic wavy lines. It really doesn't matter. Don't try to be super precise, but what will help you is if you take a piece of file folder, cut it out, and then make a 1 inch frame spot so that that will be what you see when you're transferring your drawing. That will help eliminate all of this distraction with the rest of the drawing. So all you're going to do is, let's just start with this big line in the center. That is coming right out of the corner. So we're just going to place a little dot there. And it doesn't quite go to the next corner. It scooches over just a little bit. So let's just make a little dot. That way when I'm drawing my line, I know where I'm going. All right, so that line is that line. And then I've got this one right next to it. Kind of comes out about right there. Again, don't worry about precision too much. And that arcs the other way. And then I've got this tiny little line here. Okay, that's it. So that drawing, box 1 is done. You're 1/32 of the way there. Okay, and so the next one is going to be, you're going to transfer the information from this box into this one. We see that this line looks like it's going to continue up. Okay. this line. It's more than, you just kind of look at your halfway point. It's more than halfway over, maybe a third. That's probably good. And that line is going to go almost to the corner, but not quite. So we're just going to mark a dot there. We know sort of which way it arcs. All right, next one. And then next one. And then just continue along this way, making sure that you're staying with what's just in this box. You may have to move it over a little bit just so that you can see what line is connecting from the previous one that you've done. But essentially, if you work that all the way up and just continue the lines, you won't believe how successful it is to just enlarge your drawing that way. Once you have that drawing, you're going to reverse the pattern. And you're going to do that by having your drawing all laid out. It'll look like this. You're going to rip another piece of freezer paper that is the same size, 11 by, well, it's 18 inches since that's how wide freezer paper is. So you'll rip off a piece of freezer paper 18 by, let's just say 25. Outline the box. And then transfer the drawing. You're just tracing. So again, make sure that the shiny sides are together and the paper side is up. Transfer all of the lines. Transfer all the numbers to both drawings. Make sure you're transferring the registration marks to both drawings. And then make highlights where I've made highlights so that you can stay within the quadrants just like we did in the butterfly. So that we'll be working just the quad. Well, they're not really quadrants, I'm sorry. Sections we'll call them because there's sections A through G. So keep those all together and we'll piece them individually within the section number, within the highlight. Okay, so once you've got your enlarged drawings, come back here and we'll talk about the assembly of this. Okay, so again, we're working within each section. This is section A here. I've got my pattern pieces cut out. I've made sure that they are labeled and that all of the registration marks are on here. You'll notice that the freezer paper is pressed to the right side of the fabric because we'll be working on the right side of this the whole time. I'm going to talk you through this, but if you want to watch a really great lesson on how to do this, visit Rose Hughes' show. She is the visionary behind this amazing technique. You're going to love it. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is I've got piece 1 and 2 here. You just lift the freezer paper off of one of the pieces and slide the other piece underneath, and you'll be matching up the registration marks. You want to leave just a tiny little bit of space in there, like a needle's width, because you're going to be stitching in that. But to keep those pieces good and tight on there, just go ahead and press that freezer paper down again. Take it over to your machine and you're going to stitch this line. Okay? Then this is 1 unit. Lift up number 3. Slide that back under, matching the 2 registration marks that I've gotten, leaving yourself just a little bit of space there. Press this back down and then stitch this line and work pretty much in the order of the pieces. You'll find a couple of the pieces that you'll have to put together, like 1 and 2. You would have to put those together to put it into 3, but that will make sense, and I've listed some scenarios where that's going to happen in the pattern. You'll notice too, like in the fish section in the belly, you'll find a place where you can add several pieces in a vertical strip so that all you're doing is sewing lines in the same direction. You can actually piece all of those at the same time and then take it over to your sewing machine and sew the line so that you're not back and forth with each individual piece. Once you stitch the pieces together, take the freezer paper off, just 1 piece at a time. And I actually have this flat and in my hand, that way if I feel any metal coming down the background, I know I'm in trouble. And you're just going to trim the seam allowance off and think 1/16 of an inch as you're trimming. You don't really want to get too much closer than that because your fabrics, especially if you're working with silks, and I know you've interfaced those silks, but still, you'll get some fraying. Don't panic too much if you get a little bit of fraying because we are going to be couching over these seams with yarn. So, okay. And then once that's trimmed, you'll put your freezer paper back right in place, right along your stitching line, because you're going to need those registration marks to join this section to the long section that goes along the edge here. Once you have all of your sections assembled, then you can assemble the sections, and any order that you see fit is fine since we're staying on the top and there's no flipping and sewing. You can just put them together and stitch them along the line, like the A and B. Here you'll be stitching, you know, this section here to the entire B section with this line here. Once your pieces are assembled, then you're going to put the two sections together so that the fish are facing each other, and then we're going to make a sandwich and take it over and couch and quilt it. And I'll explain that next time.